Coming up on this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto, the White House remains adamant that any federal reform of cannabis laws is not on the agenda. Maybe these ads will help.
President Trump had the courage to sign Right to Try, healing American patients. Let's do it again. Reschedule cannabis and put America first. American Rights and Reform PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
A political action committee funded by MSOs is spending $1 million on a campaign to remind the president of his campaign promises. And cannabis tax hikes in Ohio get shut down, and we hear from one of the lobbyists who made sure that would happen.
In other words, rather than legalizing, the way the bills were reading was to criminalize. And that's not what legalization is about.
Plus, the founding executive of New York's Office of Cannabis Management, Dashida Dawson, is resigning, while the U.S. Supreme Court sides with a truck driver who tested positive for THC after buying a CBD-only product and now will get triple damages. Plus, in Michigan, it's the Hash Bash, an annual celebration of all things cannabis in Ann Arbor, Michigan, at the university, and Amie Carter was there. Plus, Apple unveils a great new product on April Fool's Day. It's the iBong. According to their VP, Trent Vapeworth, it costs only $1,999 and has specific strain pods and charging cables only available through Apple. It looks great, but in reality, it's just another hoax on April Fool's Day. No fooling here. Alaina Pinto is back on Cannabis Coast to Coast News next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News, PCMTV's weekly roundup of cannabis news from coast to coast and around the world. I'm Alaina Pinto. Should I remind you again to download our app? On it, you can get the first look of this news program every week. Plus, it features the most viewed news shows from the past 4 years where we document the fight to end cannabis prohibition. Today, we start with 1 million reasons why there might be more attention on federal reform now. It's actually a $1 million advertising campaign funded by MSOs through the U.S. Cannabis Roundtable and PAC, the Political Action Committee of American Rights and Reform. There are 2 ads. One attacks former President Biden and Democrats, and the other attacks Canada and Democrats. Here's that one.
Canada is attacking American cannabis companies, and Democrats aren't helping. Medical cannabis is legal in 40 states, but Washington treats it the same as heroin. That means American companies can't conduct research and are barred from the stock exchange, while Canadian companies cash in. This is an America First fight. President Trump had the courage to sign Right to Try, healing American patients. Let's do it again. Reschedule cannabis and put America first. American Rights and Reform PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
You may not like the methods to the madness that describes President Trump's first 100 days in the White House, but if these ads get attention for the reform measures he used on the campaign trail for rescheduling, it is a step in the right direction. PCMTV founder Jimmy Young talked with the executive director of National Cannabis Industry Association, Aaron Smith.
Thanks, Alaina. Joining me now is Aaron Smith, the executive director of the NCIA. And Aaron and I will be co-hosting the Voice of Cannabis podcast coming up a little bit later in the month of April. We're looking forward to that. But Aaron, the Super PAC, the Political Action Committee, and the U.S. Cannabis Council has released a couple of these videos that are trying to portray President Trump as a hero to the cannabis industry. And I wonder, what's your reaction to that? And at this point, does anything that's positive coming out of D.C. give us some hope?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to know, we're only a couple months into this new administration, so they've got, 1 million priorities in front of them. And so it's important that we do, light a fire under them when it comes to the cannabis issue, because the president did, on more than one occasions, express positive opinions around the issue. But, it's not at the top of the priority list. And so, these ads, I think the Roundtable did a great job at getting these out there to remind him and those around him in the administration that this is one of the priorities that he promised to move forward.
Right. It's more like, hey, remember, you campaigned on this. You said this. Are you going to live up to it? Is kind of the whole premise of this campaign.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it probably also helps with Congress too, because a lot of Republicans in Congress are still resistant on the marijuana issue. And then you tell them, well, your dear leader over here supported it, and it kind of changes their mind because they are very much in lockstep behind the president. So I think it's also, but a lot of them don't know because there's a million things they're dealing with again. So I think it's good to have a reminder out there that this is the position you take, and there's a reason he took that position. And I imagine it's the fact that 3 out of 4 Americans don't support marijuana prohibition.
Right. They want it legalized or at least decriminalized at this point. And any win at this point would be good for the industry. Am I right? And yeah.
Yeah, the industry needs policy reform now more than ever. I mean, it's not easy to operate any business, much less one that is under these high regulations that exist in the states. Ridiculous, unfair taxation due to 280E, banking situation. There's a lot of issues that really need to be addressed at the federal level through congressional action and or action from the president, and that's what these ads we're discussing, really deal with, is the rescheduling issue.
Yeah, and I'm not going to get into some of the inaccuracies of it because the last time I checked, the Controlled Substances Act was introduced by a guy named Nixon when I was like 13 years old, and I didn't like him then, and I still don't like him. He's still haunting me in some capacity. Not that it matters, but that Controlled Substances Act needs to be rewritten. Is there any chance at all that the DEA would ever think about rewriting that, or is that a DOJ?
Actually, it would be Congress, and probably one of the biggest flaws here that we're seeing right now is that the control over what schedule a drug is not in the hands of medical science or the HHS or the FDA or any of these agencies that deal with medicine and science. It's in the hands of the DEA, which is a law enforcement agency. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really make sense because if the HHS, the health authority says cannabis shouldn't be Schedule 1, it should be Schedule 3. Well, that should be the authority. The DEA should just be there to enforce the law. But the way that the Controlled Substances Act was written, under the Nixon administration, then it actually gives all of that authority to either Congress or the DEA. And so I don't think the DEA would want to change that because that would be ceding power. But from a common sense perspective, it doesn't make any sense that DEA would be making the law and enforcing it.
A government that doesn't make any sense. I'm shocked to hear this. Shocked to hear that. Aaron, you and I are going to team up and do the Voice of Cannabis podcast coming up in April. You've already got a couple of guests. Do you want to give a little plug on who might be coming in for at least the first show in mid-April?
Yeah, I can't wait to be back with you on a regular basis with our podcast. We have Jillian Schauer, who's the executive director of CANRA, the Cannabis Regulators Association, to give us a little preview on what she's going to be talking about at our National Stakeholders Summit in Washington, D.C., which is coming up in May, along with our lobby days. I think it's going to be a great conversation and really looking forward to it.
There you go. Well, that'll be in a few weeks. Stay tuned, as they say.
That show is going to be a must-watch program on the PCM TV network and NCIA's Voice of Cannabis with Aaron Smith and Jimmy Young. It debuts on Wednesday, April 16th, and there'll be a new episode released every Wednesday after that. In New York this week, the founding director of the Office of Cannabis Management, Dashida Dawson, announced her resignation after 3 years at the helm of the regulatory board that has been plagued by bad hiring practices, out-of-control illegal storefronts, and multiple lawsuits. It seems that every state with a vibrant adult use legal market has a history of civil disobedience with an annual event like the New York City Cannabis Parade or the Freedom Rally here in Massachusetts. But in Michigan, it's the Hash Bash, an event that has been held long before cannabis was legalized for adults in that vibrant market. That market has grown to rival California as one of the top revenue producers in the industry. But this past week, the Michigan Cannabis Regulatory Agency revoked the license of Flavor Galaxy and yanked its processor license after many regulatory violations. The owners, Hannah and Jacqueline Sheena, are now permanently banned from applying for any new license or joining any other business in that industry. Last year, the CRA recalled over 1,000 infused pre-rolls that did not submit testing in its final form. Cutting corners is frowned upon in any business, and especially one like Flavor Galaxy that made a regular practice of that. No word on whether any member of Flavor Galaxy was at this weekend's Hash Bash in Michigan, but we know Amie Carter was there.
I'm Amie Carter from Michigan Weedsters with a Michigan Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Today I am reporting from Ann Arbor, Michigan for the 54th Annual Hash Bash Celebration and Rally. The one and only Tommy Chong was featured speaker for this weekend's event.
This year it's for the beautiful plant, wine and
thousands of cannabis advocates, businesses, patients, and anyone who is proud of the work Michiganders continue to do to move on from prohibition. Despite some doom and gloom in the industry, events like this are so important to re-energize the passion we all have for normalization and acceptance of this powerful plant medicine. It is always such an amazing event. That will do it for this week's Michigan Cannabis Report. And I'm Amie Carter from the Michigan Weedsters with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
One of the two oldest adult use legal markets in the United States is Colorado. There is a continuing story out of that state that once again sheds a light on the issue of hemp and Delta-9 cannabis. Sure enough, a company there is now guilty of fraud, and our Colorado correspondent Xavier Jaillet has an update on the mammoth mess of Mammoth Farms.
I'm Xavier Jaillet, chair of the Colorado chapter of the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce and a non-attorney professional at the McDonald Hopkins law firm. And here's what's happening in Colorado cannabis news this week. I've got a bit of an update on the last story I reported on, that is of Mammoth Farms suing the Marijuana Enforcement Division. Now we've gained access to expanded information about that lawsuit, in which the CEO of Mammoth Farms, Justin Truard, has alleged that the Marijuana Enforcement Division has both allowed legal regulated marijuana to be diverted from the regulated cannabis market in Colorado to the black market, and has further allowed cannabis operators in Colorado to use illegal, in the state at least, hemp-derived cannabinoids in regulated marijuana products. Now, this expansion focuses on the concept of inversion. Now, inversion is different than the well-known concept of diversion with a D, which is when a cannabis company takes legal, licensed, regulated marijuana and diverts it into the illicit black market. Now, inversion is when a licensed cannabis company takes licensed, regulated marijuana, sells it just like diversion on the black market, but then masks that sale by reintroducing into the market illegal hemp-derived cannabinoid products. Now, again, illegal just in the state of Colorado. Hemp-derived cannabinoid, as many know, are federally lawful, but each state takes a different approach into whether or not it allows the sale of such products to consumers in that state. Now, Justin Truard, the CEO of Mammoth Farms, has discovered this discrepancy through review of the metric seed-to-sale tracking system, in which he alleges that certain operators are taking their lawful cannabis, selling it for higher prices than the lawful market on the black market, and then buying low-cost hemp-derived cannabinoid products, then reintroducing them into the licensed market to mask the initial diversion. Now, that's where the concept of inversion comes from. And this, of course, continues to highlight the battleground of hemp-derived cannabinoid products versus what we'll call marijuana-derived marijuana products, or state legal products versus federally legal products. And this should be a continued battleground and battle for the coming years, as we do not expect much change from the federal administration when it comes to the status of marijuana or hemp. So stay tuned for further updates on this story and for other Colorado cannabis news. That's it for the Colorado Cannabis News Update this week. I'm Xavier Jaillet reporting from Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
That'll do it for the A Block, but don't go away because we are going international in our next segment, from Europe to Canada, and of course back here in the United States with Doug Miller, who is not so high on Wall Street after the collapse of the stock market and its impact on the publicly traded cannabis stocks. Plus, at the end of the show, PCM TV founder Jimmy Young's Cannabis Confessional from Jason Raposa's podcast. Cannabis Coast to Coast News continues after this.
This or that, what'll they say? flower or vape?
Neither now.
Indoor or outdoor?
Yes.
All of it. Would you have free rolls or loose flower?
Yes.
So you consume whatever?
Yes.
Yeah.
How am I doing so far?
Ready to take your craft to the next level? Imagine faster extractions, purer products, and more profits. Sounds good, right? At Pure 5 Extraction, we've revolutionized cannabis extraction with our game-changing technology. No solvents, no heat, just the cleanest, most natural process on the market. Whether you're a boutique grower or a large-scale operation, Pure 5 has the tools to elevate your business worldwide. Visit pure5extraction.com today. Pure 5 Extraction, because your plants deserve the best.
What if we're right? What if all of a sudden they discovered that there is medical use for marijuana and that it is good for you and it's better than alcohol and it's better than opioids and it helps your health? What if we're right? What if they find that out?
Specific cannabinoids have medical value. These are facts.
I'm here today in hopes to assist in removing the demonized stigma of cannabis and the perception that cannabis is just about getting high. The true base of this plant has to be known.
I don't think anybody should ever go to jail for cannabis. Get some medicine, and everybody should have access to it.
This is something which, at the very, very least, is the key to alleviating suffering and extending life for millions of human beings. Right? For returning some kind of balance to our society, and quite possibly of restoring our planet's natural balance as well.